Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. We are here to talk about how adopting reusable packaging systems and supply chains can support achieving corporate sustainability objectives, a big mouthful. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to take the opportunity to tackle this topic from a financial perspective. And then we're going to tie that back to sustainability. So what we'll do first is we're going to do some introductions, introduce our amazing panel, and then we'll dive right into it. Karen, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Hi. Yes, it's loud. So I'm Karen Witten. I'm the head of sustainability for Tosca. We're a pooling organization, and I'll talk a little bit about that with my talk.
I'm Patrick Owens. I'm with MARAD. A little bit about our company, and I'm going to take a different approach than I normally would. I was out at a climate tech conference last week called Verge, and I've been going there for the last couple of years, and it's all about carbon emissions. And I just finished listening to the head of Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, talk about creating a more resilient electric grid so that California and obviously the rest of the U.S. can follow the lead, can scale up appropriately and to have a very resilient grid. So as we realize the promise of a more sustainable climate and a more livable earth, that PG&E can be part of that and can be anticipating and growing. And at the end of his talk, he said, well, tell me about MARAD. And I said, well, it's kind of interesting you say that. I said, because when I think about MARAD, I think about PG&E and what you're doing. I said, just as you're trying to create a resilient grid, MARAD is a group of sustainability and supply chain professionals that came together a couple years ago. And we said, we can create an infrastructure and the architecture in a digital way that can allow companies to more easily on-road reusables, recyclables, and potentially upcyclable materials in a way that really does democratize access to this highway. So we looked at it that way, and we built this model that way. And so as you hear me talk today, I'm really from the sustainability side. I'm very passionate about waste. And I'll say this, in the world we live in today, we can talk about climate, and there's two languages we need all of us to speak. I speak the language of carbon, okay, carbon emissions. Obviously, we talk about that all the time. But the language of waste is just as important, because it's the language of waste when we talk about circularity, as we talk about where we want to go. If we can all become bilingual and talk both languages, and the language of waste, because that's really where we can attack it with circular supply chains and reusables, then what we can do is going to basically create the change at the customer level we need to change, because at the end of the day, this is all about change management.
Thanks. My name is Govi Saha from Cal Polymers. We specialize in developing technology to recover the waste, end of life, bring it to a second life. And we specialize in plastic area. There is tremendous opportunity. People think plastic is bad for environment because it is disposed and never disintegrate. We have come out with a several technology to take those challenging and the difficult material and found a life back in as a second life. So anyone supporting sustainability, if they're generating waste, please talk to us. Or if they're willing to integrate the recycled material to your product to replace the virgin material, we have enough engineering people to help you formulate and be successful there. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm George Altman. I'm with a company called Vantage Plastics. It's a family of companies. And first of all, I'd just like to say that it's really an honor to be here to talk about this topic today. It's extremely timely and extremely important for us to be looking at sustainability and some of the financial things that are associated with it. As I said, Vantage Plastics is a family of companies, vertically integrated. We started as a thermoformer of heavy gauge cut sheet plastics. Then we added our own extrusion line, so we supply our own extruded sheet. Then we added a recycling or an upcycling center called Edge Material Management. After that, we have most recently added an injection molding operation called Lotus Technologies. And there's a strong marriage between both thermoforming and injection molding we found in lots of applications. And I'm not sure who in the audience today, if you're people that are purchasers of packaging, producers of packaging, but hopefully we'll have a chance to share some examples of things that we've done that we think have been very beneficial to customers.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you, team. And I'm Jess Bonsall. I'm the Sustainability Director for 4840 Solutions. We are a wood pallet remanufacturing company. So we get to touch a lot of different plastic products. We also have a reverse logistics organization where we see plastics and we're getting reusable containers back into the system so they can continue their life. So to kick things off, like I mentioned, we're really wanting to focus on thinking about sustainability from the financial side of things. And we're doing that. You're seeing a number of regulations that are emerging across the globe, really starting to drive on both reporting as well as monitoring of sustainability criteria. And we hear a lot of folks then start to talk about, well, how do you balance? How do you start to balance cost against the true traditional side of sustainability? What does that look like for a company? And then how does this get wrapped up in reporting? How do we share that? Karen, I'd love to hear from you and your team. Talk to us a bit about how you're working to strike that balance.
So sustainability reporting has been around for quite a while. We've had investors ask about it. We have customers ask about the sustainability of our products and our processes. And that's now being morphed into more regulatory driven. So if you are and have any business in Europe, you'll know that this corporate sustainability reporting directive that's come out that's put some structure around the reporting requirements. And in the States, we've got, for publicly traded companies, the SEC requirements to report Scope 1 and Scope 2, those internal emissions. And love it or hate it, whether it's regulatory or whether we have to do it because that's the expectation, it's there. The neat thing about CSRD is that it's bringing double materiality into play. So really having to look at the financial piece as well as those aspects around environmental issues. And as we know, one of the big pieces on the environmental side is around emissions. And for the vast majority of companies, that is the Scope 3 part of it. And that's where packaging sits. That's where the rubber meets the road in terms of packaging. So from a company perspective, understanding the costs, but also the environmental impacts of where your materials come from. How are those materials used? There's that sort of category 1, category 2, if you're into that kind of pieces on Scope 3, but that's kind of the material bit, whether you consider it a capital expense or whether you can deem it a product or something that you use time and over. Then there's also the logistics of moving those products with that packaging around. That's also an emissions perspective. And then finally, waste. And we've touched on it and we'll touch on it again. And Tim did as well earlier. So that whole focus on what happens to packaging at end of life. And the default has been, as it's been mentioned, is recycling. We've got our packaging, we can have as much as we want as long as we recycle it. And the zero to waste strategies are all focused, when you read them, around everything going to recycling. And recycling has its place. But as a lot of people have mentioned, there is that hierarchy, that reduction, as well as the reuse piece that I think a lot of people are missing. And going back to regulations, there's these new extended producer responsibility regulations coming in. And it's horrible in the States because everyone's got their own idea and, not that I pray for federal regulations, but it'd be nice to have one set of regulations that's consistent and that has a focus. So that's part of what we do with the RPA is that we try and get that consistency amongst that. But it does move the needle in terms of putting money on recycling and making sure that people aren't just thinking about packaging as something that, is reused and, not reused, but is there and then can be recycled. But there's a value to it and there's a cost associated with it. Recycling is not free. There has to be a cost. And that also will tip the balance towards reusables. Because if you think about it, every time you have a piece of packaging that has to be disposed of, now it's got a cost associated with it. And I know there are nuances, so, you know, this type of packaging here and that type of packaging there, but the principle is that. So if you have single use, you're going to be paying every single time. If you've got a reusable solution, you're paying maybe not at all, because some of the European regulations eliminate and don't even count that. But even so, you pay once versus something. And when you think that every time, when you think that a reusable can replace, say, pallets, 10 times plus of using that pallet versus buying it every time. And when you talk about reusable containers, now you're talking 100, 150 times. So once versus paying 150 times. Do the math. It's really cost driven. And that I like, you know, I don't like regulations per se, but that drive to push. So that's the direct finance. And then you've got the indirect pieces around, you know, better protection of products as they're moving with the more rigid containers that you have in terms of reusables. That has a cost associated with it, as well as a footprint reduction. Because if it's not going to waste, that footprint emissions is much reduced. And then there's also the pooling. And I said I was going to talk a little bit about our pooling activities, but, you know, instead of every customer having their own set of reusable, you know, products, you know, crates or pallets or bins or whatever, and having to keep those, look after them themselves, store them when they're not in use, we provide a pooling solution, which means that we have those different solutions. We provide them to suppliers, either the farmers or the processors. They go on to the retailers, we collect them back, wash them, sanitize them, repair them, and send them out. So people are sharing a resource. It's not just everybody has their own. And that, again, reduces that footprint. Because now instead of 5 companies having it, they can all use one company's solution. So that is really, you know, when, again, the cost and the emissions reduction. And if your companies that are starting to look at net zero and putting a cost around carbon tax, if you can reduce that emissions, then your costs definitely come down. You know, and it's interesting, and I'll finish with this. It's interesting that, again, from a regulatory perspective, and I sound like I'm like, hey, for regulations, and I'm really not. But the packaging waste regulations in Europe, nightmare they might be, they are the first time driving the discussion and thoughts around reusables. There are targets there around companies and countries increasing the amount of reusables. And that is because of the financial as well as the environmental benefits.
Absolutely. Love them or hate them, regulations are here to stay. I think a lot of what you touched on, Karen, goes back to data, right? And what those metrics start to look like. Patrick, particularly where your team sits, any thoughts around, you know, this balance between cost, sustainability, and reporting, especially in that tie back to the metrics piece? What does that start to look like?
I think where we are today, and Karen touched on EPR. I'll just touch on EPR in California, for instance. California just released the impact analysis report, the Cal Recycle, last month. And companies doing business in California with revenue of $1 million or more, which is basically just about any restaurant, any facility doing business in California, will start paying into the EPR fund, which is going to be about $5 billion a year. And so starting basically in 2027, these companies are going to not only be paying for all of the traditional costs of solid waste management and landfilling, but now this additional cost. So this cost is now that's borne today by the taxpayers moving to the manufacturer. And so when you talk about when's the time right, there's never been a better time for reusables. And so what I would strongly encourage and what I do is I sit down with my customer as a consultant in sustainability. And I have a background in Six Sigma, so I'll apply the principles of Lean Six Sigma, and I'll work with them to define projects of where they can find excess opportunity. And we'll start with the pallet unit loads. And so if I'm working in a supply chain, for instance, and they have a distribution center that may have, we use a proxy. So we'll say pallets is for a pallet unit load. So if they have 10 million pallets a year coming through their distribution center, which is not unusual, and the typical pallet unit load cost, when you add in the boxes, the packaging, the wrap, the pallet, is anywhere from $15, it can be as high as $45. Okay, multiply that by $10, or by 10 million, I'm sorry. And now you've got what they throw into the COGS, okay, as far as the part of the financial statement. If we start rethinking and shifting that paradigm, say, why are we doing this? We start looking at it now as a variable asset. And we say, these are variable assets that we can control. And so when you're talking about where do you find opportunities to shift your customer thinking from linear to circular, start with what's right in front of you. Do the math, help them. And so when I talk about being bilingual, I also say you need to be able to talk about return on environment, ROE, return on equity, and return on investment. Those four ROI, ROEs are really critical. Return on environment is easy. If you're not a carbon scientist, I can tell you today with AI, there are some incredible AI technologies I saw last week actually, where you can put in there and say, hey, different scenarios, and it will tell you what the carbon offsets are, what the carbon losses are, what the carbon emissions avoided are. And that's pretty compelling. And so I would strongly encourage you leaving here, think about when you approach your customer today, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And these costs are real. And so I've got customers going to realize an impact of over $10 million a year just by virtue of this new regulation in California. Multiply that across the multiple states that have EPR law now, and you've got a compelling argument for reusables. Now, what I also do in my consulting world is because I know they're making this journey already, is I say, you know what, there's another incentive for you. You don't have to get all the way to full circularity. Let's get to zero waste. And so I have the ability actually to work with them now when we're doing these consultative projects to get them zero waste certified with no additional cost. And why do you say that's important? Because for them, if you get a company to zero waste, you haven't just earned the certificate, is you shifted the culture. And when you shift that culture, you're accelerating the transition to circularity. And so I advise you to think about how you can embrace zero waste. And there's TRUE and there's Zero Waste USA. There's a bunch of different certification bodies that are out there. And think about how you can leverage these different strategies to accelerate this transition, because it's all of our interest. And I can tell you, like I said, the financial argument is compelling now. There is no longer a concern that you can't get over that hump. When I first started working years ago, and I'm a little older, but I'm a late bloomer, I was told that the best salespeople learn to speak the language of money. Most people speak the language of things. They can talk about their products. They can talk about how their products perform in the attributes. But if you can actually learn to speak the language of money and how solution can save money, both real money and carbon emissions, then there's really no reason you shouldn't be successful in almost all of your customer engagements.
Absolutely. You talk really interesting that the mind shift, right? How we start to really show that our company is evolving. And I want to go back to a point that actually Tim had shared, if you had the chance to see him at the kickoff of our learning center, that shift in mindset from recycle to reuse. And how you start to see cost savings being driven out of that, but really and truly how you start to shift the mindset within your organization. And Gobi, I know your team has tackled this mindset shift. Talk to us a bit about how you see that in the market, how you see that in your team.
Just now, as Patrick says, people understand the money, the saving. Walmart became the largest corporation when people started shopping cheaper, saving money there. So money talks. There is a myth in the industry that one is recycling can be more expensive. Actually, the way we introduce product back, it saves you cost. Not only carbon footprint, but also money, the dollar terms. So let me come back to the 3R, which everybody understand and know and practice for years. Reduce. So in a reduction, we come back and saying, how to lightweight a material. So if you are making a product needing 10 pounds of material, how can I make it a 9 pound, and an 8 pound, and a 7 pound with the same type of work it can provide, so without compromising. Secondly, we also work with the reusable, which is the second one, that integrate more recycled material to make your product. You don't have to use 100% virgin material. We can provide you material with the properties that you're looking for, which is very, very similar to virgin. People talk is a myth that, oh, recycled material, it won't be good. It won't have the quality. If you're serious, yes, we can give you the same quality or similar quality. Number two. Number three, sometimes people say, how many times can you recycle a material? Now the technology is coming, the chemical processes are coming, there are additives coming that we can bring a material like plastic material back in life many, many more times than you can even imagine. And the technology is continuously developing and making it better. The impossible is possible. The third thing is recycling. That's what we do currently. We take waste from the market and we process it and make it a replacement of the virgin raw material in the plastic industry. So you can buy or you can use our material. If you have any challenges, we fix the properties. It's all possible. And make sure it works and it replaces that you have no challenges, but you can put my product has 30% recycle or 50% recycle. Today, Coca-Cola is giving even a drinking bottle with 100% recycled polyester. People never thought that they can drink or eat product from a recycled material. So we do produce material with FDA or alternative. There is a cost, but still our drive is to bring the cost down and keep it more competitive. And another thing that we have been doing, as I say, like we adopted technology. So a company came to us with the 48 plants in North America. 4 plants I traveled, and they dumped about 15 million pounds of their waste. It's a polypropylene with adhesive in the labeling industry. Now we have the technology. We have just introduced about a couple of months back. It took us a year and a half to develop those equipments, and all mechanical. So now it is ready to get back into the second life. So that just 4 plant itself, we can recover and help 15 million pounds from going to the landfill. So the story is, let's believe in recycling. Let's believe that whatever is not possible today, it will be possible tomorrow. And let's all work together. The only thing that I request everybody is don't trash any plastic. Help collecting it. We will find a solution for the second life. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Gobi. You know, you touched on a couple of really interesting pieces that I'd like to explore a little bit further. And so, George, I'm gonna tee this up to you. You know, there are so many different aspects of sustainability when we think about environmental, social governance pieces, but tying that back to cost savings and operational efficiency. Can you share with us some of the undervalued benefits you've seen of companies adopting reusable packaging systems?
Sure. I think, I'll coin a phrase I heard you use, that we're on a sustainability journey. And I think the Reusable Packaging Association is actually enhancing some of the vocabulary that we use relative to that, and we'll see more of it. As a manufacturer, we're starting to look at kind of the greenhouse gas effect that we have all the way back through our supply chain. But when Tim talks about, or the Reusable Packaging Association talks about smart packaging or intelligent packaging, that's a catchphrase for a lot of things. I mean, it can be the lightweighting of materials, it can be the usability, the recyclability, the ergonomics, how humans interact with it. We're doing more and more packaging that's touchless packaging. In other words, a human never really touches it. It's always interfacing with automation. With the labor issues that we have today, we want to take people sometimes out of those menial kinds of task kind of things and better utilize them for operating equipment and so forth, as opposed to, just a menial once over and over and over again task. Some of the things that I think we can point to some specific case examples. We had a customer come to us that actually is promoting a sustainable product. It's an energy storage battery that would be installed in people's homes. This is being distributed around the world, all over the earth. They came to, and it's solar generated, this energy storage, so that's sustainable, right? And they came to us and they were looking for us to create kind of a plastic pillow sort of thing at the top and the bottom to hold it within a one-time use cardboard package. At this point, we've produced 80,000 units of, one of our designers came up with an alternative, where we proposed, hey, let's think differently. Let's think about your finances. Let's think about we can produce and generate a reusable package for you that your installation people can take this device, appliance essentially, to a home. They can install it, which takes a bit of work to get it tied into the electric structure of the home. Then the people that install bring that packaging back, and if it's needing to be cleaned, it can be cleaned, but generally not, and they can then refill it and use it over and over and over. We have products that are out there in the field that customers report back to us that are still in use after 20 years. We suspect that this container can be used at least 200 times. And the full order that we'll be producing for this company is like 178,000 units of these. This is a big project. It's all over the world. If we translated that 178,000 units that we'll produce in times 200 pieces of times that it can be used, that's something like 35,600,000 single-use containers that we've just taken out of the atmosphere. And we calculated that the average weight of those single-use containers would be about 21.6 pounds. That translates into almost 800 million pounds of stuff that would have ended up who knows where. So I don't think that, in terms of financial calculation, our customer didn't share a lot in terms of how much that benefited them, but you got to know that they calculated the numbers. Another case that we worked on, we have a dedicated innovation team within our organization, as well as a dedicated materials team to constantly research at different applications of materials. But the innovation team, we came up with a patented technology in thermoforming that lets us open up the design field. Thermoforming quarterly here, the Society of Plastics Engineers gave us a gold award for this. And basically, we put a injection molded through our sister company Lotus stacking column within the tray, which opened up the real estate inside of the tray. And in this case, it allowed the customer, automotive industry, this was an application. Automotive is actually one of the first adopters of reusable packaging. They're ahead of the game. So in this case, it doesn't seem like much, but it let them get one more part. Density as part of the smart packaging. The more you can get in your transport system. And in this case, the automotive company, and this article suggests it, they reported that it saved them about 1 million miles in transportation because of that extra density in the load that they were getting. And that translated into $2 million of savings for them is what they estimated. If I have time, can I go into the third?
Yeah, I think we want to save about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So come up with some good ones because our team likes to be challenged. But yeah, definitely, please share.
Okay. The third case that we would share is it's a food application for the agricultural industry. And this is a company, it's called Riplocker, and they're based on Bainbridge Island, which is off from Seattle. And they have a lot of experience working with fruits and vegetables and fresh products. And so they came to us and they developed a technology, essentially it involves vacuum, and an expiration or exasperating of the vacuum. So it's a completely organic approach to storing food. They don't need to use chemicals and so forth. So we worked with them for about a 3 or 4 year period in R&D because it required an extremely strong structure container to hold this vacuum in it. So at first we did a carbon fiber blend into the plastic with waste streams of carbon fiber that we found. But eventually we ended up not actually needing it because we could put structure using metal inside of the twin sheet formed packaging. At any rate, what this product allows them to do is you can harvest, say, blueberries in South America today, and they can apply the technology, and they can transport those blueberries or flowers or whatever fresh item somewhere on the other side of the earth. And we can open that container then 3 months later, and the material that was harvested and placed in there is just as fresh as it was the day that it was picked. Now that's a tremendous sustainability story for the farmer because they're not losing so much of their crop. They're not having to sell it really quickly at a reduced price. They can kind of distribute it over time and get a better price for it. And all of that money that went into the fertilizers and things to grow the crops. Flower shops are really enjoying this because it's keeping the flowers fresh for a long period of time. They begin to wilt really quickly. And then we, as a consumer, are going to benefit greatly because a lot of times crops were raised because they last longer, but not because they taste great or because they have good nutritional value. So this will now allow the farmers to raise crops that we're going to enjoy a lot more because they'll taste a lot better and they'll be more nutrient beneficial. And, it's a win-win-win kind of a story that we're real proud to have had a chance to work with. So.
Absolutely. So I will say we're recognizing that we started a bit late. We're going to support keeping everyone on time. And there is some incredible knowledge in this panel. And you'll be able to find Gobi. His team has a booth. George as well. Karen and Patrick will be floating around. So what we want to do is we want to save a little bit of time for questions. So I'd love to hear from the audience. Like I said, we're really wanting to help everybody tie together sustainability, cost. How do those two meet? How do we tackle that challenge? So any questions from those that are out there? Super exciting. Anybody? Oh, perfect. We have a question over here.
So what software do you use for tracking the cost and the benefits for the environment? Like if you were to report it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe does someone from one of our companies want to take that, and then maybe Patrick, you can wrap us up. Karen.
So I think like packaging, not one size fits all, to be honest. So we use a number of different types of tracking. I mean, we're now moving towards more digital tracking of containers, so we know where they are, we know the routing, and therefore we can identify, how far it's traveled, and therefore it goes into the, how much we have to charge people to move things around. Also, we understand the number of turns on our products as well, and the assets. So internally, we can identify, how much we have to purchase to replace and all that good stuff. And then in terms of the benefits to the customer, we can, as Tim mentioned earlier, we can track and trace the impacts to that product as well. So working with customers, they are also, because they have their own mechanisms for understanding loss, but we can provide that information into there. So there's not one system that I know of that will do the cost and the benefit. We do life cycle assessments. That's the other side. So We do comparative assessments between, our assets and services versus single use, and you can put costs behind that as well. So, I'm not sure that it'd be nice again to have one piece of software that you could plug everything in, but I think like everything at the moment, it's a mixture, and it's what's used on the sustainability side, what's used on the business side, and how those two come together from a team perspective.
Absolutely. Karen and I actually had a chance to collaborate on talking about LCAs the other day. So it was a really good conversation. Patrick, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
So we've built a lot of the capability onto our platform. So the digitized platform we have is designed, and we tie it back into some of the EPA models as well. And then beyond that, we do work with some third parties, especially in the AI realm, so that we can do some rapid modeling of different costs and different scenarios. But there's a lot of options out there, but if you do happen to have time today, stop by our booth. Be glad to show you a demo of the MARAD platform and what we can do. But it's really important to understand that when you're talking about modeling and where you're going, that you really got to build on all the different variables that are available out there, because it's the variables that are going to make or break the argument. And so really understanding the compliance issues and what's happening on the national basis is going to be a critical driver in whether or not something makes sense or not. From an economic standpoint, it's always going to make sense from a return on environment. But for the RO, right now with companies going into the new year, and we're seeing more and more companies file for bankruptcy, especially in the food service world, they're struggling. And if last week talking to a lot of sustainability professionals from the biggest companies, they were all saying the same thing. Our biggest challenge right now is budget. And, the secret, hopefully you walk away from here today, is that there's budget available. They've always looked at this as waste. If they just shift their paradigm and think of it as an asset, there's a ton of upside potential that they can apply to become more circular without having to go search for new budget funds.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'm going to put a little bow on that. So if you are an RPA member, or maybe you think about joining, we're also working on some tools to help support folks with that reporting piece and kind of tying together both the financial side as well as back to your kind of traditional sustainability topics. So we are right at 11:45. I want to encourage everybody to please go connect with these team members. Like I said, everybody's out here at booths. We're happy to chat. We're happy to speak with you, and we absolutely appreciate your time. So thanks, y'all.